You think you can fix this?" The words cracked through the boardroom like a whip. Sunlight bled across the glass walls, painting the polished table in gold, but the air froze the moment she spoke. She pointed at the exposed engine on the table, steel veins tangled with wires, a machine heart pulled open for surgery. Then her smirk landed like a slap. "Fix this engine and I'll marry you." The room erupted. Executives in pressed suits burst into laughter, some slapping the table, others shaking their heads as if this humiliation was the highlight of their week. Their amusement didn't sound casual. It sounded cruel, like a pack that smelled blood. And at the center of it stood him, dark skin catching the glare of fluorescent light, a gray uniform streaked with oil, apron loose at the waist, name tag tilted, half unreadable. He looked like a man out of place, a mechanic dragged into a room designed for money and mockery. That's how they wanted him seen. A worker beneath them. A man who would never sit at their table, but he didn't react. No glare, no smirk, just silence. And that silence, it wasn't weak. It was thick as glass, ready to shatter the entire room. Behind him, an intern barely older than 20 raised his phone, lens angled low. The red light glowed in secret, capturing the way laughter poured like acid, burning but never breaking the man at the table. The intern's jaw tightened. Something in him whispered, "Keep filming. This matters." The woman circled the room with the confidence of a monarch mocking a servant. Her heels clicked sharp against the marble floor, each step punctuating her dominance. He didn't move. Instead, he bent closer to the machine, fingers brushing the metal as if coaxing it to breathe again. Calm eyes scanned the tangle of steel and copper. The laughter rose louder, a storm they thought would drown him. But he had weathered storms before. A banker once told him he was too much of a risk, even with triple collateral. A hotel clerk once told him he didn't belong, standing in the lobby of a building he later bought. And now, here again, the same tone, the same arrogance, the same attempt to erase him before he spoke. He let the memories settle in his chest like iron. He let their words hang, thick in the air. He didn't fight it. He didn't need to, because silence is not surrender. Silence is control. And that was the moment the boardroom shifted. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to him, the man they thought was just a mechanic, the man about to turn their laughter into silence. He hadn't walked into this room by mistake. 2 weeks earlier, complaints had surfaced, subtle whispers about bias in promotions, jokes at the expense of younger black employees, quiet exits of talent who felt unseen. On paper, the company sparkled. Record profits, glossy press, expansion on the horizon. But under the polish, rot was spreading. And he had come to see it for himself. That's why he chose the uniform, the grease stains, the anonymity. He stripped himself of the symbols they respected. No tailored suit, no wristwatch carved from gold, no entourage shadowing his every step. Just a plain name tag and hands they thought only good for labor. To them, he looked small, disposable, invisible. But to him, invisibility was the sharpest weapon. The woman who mocked him regional director, 15 years in the company, believed she was untouchable. Her laughter wasn't spontaneous. It was practiced, polished, the kind of cruelty that had been rewarded before. And the executives in the room, they didn't stop her. They cheered. Because to them, this was hierarchy in action. This was the order they knew. Only the intern saw it differently. He had joined 3 months earlier, bright-eyed, hopeful. He thought the company was built on merit. And now, phone in hand, he watched that illusion fracture. His camera trembled, not from fear, but from rage disguised as nerves. The man in uniform, his name not spoken yet, his power still hidden, let his fingers trace the engine once more. To anyone else, it was just machinery. But for him, it was metaphor. Steel bent, beaten, burned, and yet still able to roar back to life. Just like him. Just like the people this company tried to push aside. A memory flashed 20 years earlier, when he stood outside a hiring office in Detroit. He wore his best shirt. Shoes shined until they caught the streetlight. The manager glanced once and said, "We're not looking for your type. No resume, no interview, just dismissal wrapped as policy." That rejection became fuel. Fuel that powered him through every deal, every sleepless night. every acquisition that slowly built the empire he now commanded. And this empire? The very one whose boardroom he stood in now. The irony was delicious. They mocked the mechanic. They didn't know he signed their checks. Silence still held the room, thick and heavy. Executives leaned back, smirks still plastered across their faces, unaware of the storm waiting at their table. The director smiled wider, thinking she had won. But the man in gray? He was only beginning. The laughter hadn't died, it only shifted. What started as a joke now sharpened into something uglier, like teeth bared behind polite smiles. She leaned across the polished table, her perfume mixing with the cold scent of machine oil. "Men like you fix things," she said, slow and deliberate, making sure every executive heard. "Men like us lead." The words landed like a verdict. A ripple of chuckles followed, some louder than others, a few laced with that cruel pity reserved for someone they thought beneath them. One man in a navy suit muttered, "Careful, don't let him stain the leather chairs." Another added, "Maybe he should polish the floors while he's at it." The chorus was casual, unbothered, the way people spoke when they believed power protected them. He stayed still. The engine loomed between them, its metal coils reflecting the overhead lights, a mirror for every sneer in the room. He placed one hand on its frame, steady, almost reverent, while their words pressed down like weight on his shoulders. The intern felt it too. His phone shook in his grip as he captured each insult. He wanted to speak, but the gulf between his position and theirs felt like a cliff. His voice, he thought, would tumble and vanish. Yet his silence was not agreement, it was gathering. The director smirked wider, sensing victory. "Look at him," she said, gesturing with manicured nails. "Doesn't say a word. That's obedience. That's his place." Her words cut deeper than laughter. They weren't just mocking his role, they were declaring his existence small, his silence weakness. He exhaled once, slow. The sound barely audible, but in his chest it steadied something ancient. He had been here before, countless times, written off, minimized, underestimated. And every time, silence had been the seed of his power. Still, the room pressed harder. Another executive lifted a napkin from the refreshments tray and tossed it toward him. "Here," he sneered. "Wipe the grease before you touch company property." The napkin landed near his shoes, white against the dark floor, a stain waiting to be claimed. The intern's jaw clenched. His whisper barely carried, "This isn't right." But no one listened, no one except the man in gray. He didn't reach for the napkin, didn't bend, didn't flinch. Instead, he raised his head slowly. His eyes met hers across the table. For the first time, the laughter faltered. He didn't pick up the napkin. The square of white lay at his feet, glaring against the polished floor, a silent dare. Every eye in the room waited for him to stoop, to bow, to confirm the role they had written for him. But he stayed upright. One breath, then another, each measured, deliberate, a rhythm steadier than their laughter. His silence spread like a tide, filling the cracks between their jokes until the chuckles started to thin. The director tilted her head, amused but restless. "Cat got your tongue?" she teased. "Or maybe you finally know your place." He didn't answer. His eyes lowered back to the engine, tracing its lines as though the machine itself mattered more than her words. Fingers brushed the steel, slow, careful hands that had built futures, while others only claimed them. The executives shifted in their chairs. They wanted a reaction. Anger would have proved her right. Protest would have entertained them further. But this stillness? It unsettled. The intern, phone trembling at his side, whispered almost to himself, "Why isn't he saying anything?" Yet deep down, he knew. This was not weakness. This was a fuse burning in silence. The woman laughed again, sharper now, trying to slice through the quiet. "Gentlemen, look our mechanic philosopher. Maybe he's praying to the machine." A few chuckles followed, half-hearted. The humor was slipping. He remained motionless, grounded like stone, anchored in a storm he had seen too many times. In his silence lived the memory of doors slammed in his face, of contracts doubted because of the color of his skin, of nights where he ate rejection and turned it into resolve. The room couldn't see it, but that silence was alive. It was a weight pressing back on them, forcing their laughter to echo in ways that made them uncomfortable. At last, he lifted his gaze. Not a glare, not defiance, just calm eyes meeting theirs, unblinking, unhurried. And in that gaze, a message unspoken: "Your words are noise. I am not. The napkin stayed on the floor, forgotten. And for the first time, the boardroom's laughter began to sound hollow. The silence was no longer his alone. From the back of the room, the intern steadied his phone, red light blinking against his palm. He had hesitated before, but now the weight of what he saw pressed heavier than fear. Every insult, every laugh, it wasn't just corporate banter. It was bias laid bare, and he knew the world needed to see it. He whispered into the mic, barely audible. Recording. Timestamp logged. One of the executives caught the movement, nudged the man beside him. Kids filming? He muttered, half amused, half annoyed. Let him. Nobody will care. The dismissive tone matched the smirks that still lingered. To them, the intern was invisible too, but the camera didn't blink. A woman in the corner, another junior employee, folded her arms tight, her jaw set. She wasn't recording, but her glare was sharp enough to cut glass. She leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "This isn't right." The colleague shifted uncomfortably, choosing silence over risk. The director, oblivious, basked in the echo of her own cruelty. "See?" she said loudly, gesturing at the man in uniform. "He doesn't even defend himself. That's all you need to know." The intern's stomach churned. He wanted to shout, but the man in gray turned his head slightly, eyes flicking to the phone, then to him. Just a glance. But it was enough. The intern froze, then slowly lowered the device. Not because he was silenced, but because he understood. The man's message was clear. Not yet. Words, not lenses. The room buzzed with small talk, the kind that fills space when real tension lurks beneath. Laughter thinned. Phones slid back into pockets. A few executives avoided eye contact altogether. They could feel it now, the unease, the shift, though none would admit it. The junior employee stepped forward just a fraction, voice low but firm. "He's not the problem. You are." The words didn't carry far, but they carried enough. Heads turned. The director's smirk tightened, the first crack in her polished mask. And in that crack, the room's balance began to tilt. The crack widened. The director straightened, voice louder now, cutting through the thinning laughter. "Enough games," she snapped. "This is a corporate boardroom, not a garage. You don't belong here." The words dropped like stones into still water. Ripples spread, executives shifting in their seats, a few smirking, others staring down at their watches as if disinterest could shield them from complicity. One man in a silver tie chimed in, his tone dripping with disdain. "She's right. This isn't your space. You're here to fix things, not to speak." Another added, chuckling, "Let's be honest. He probably walked in off the shop floor. Mistaken identity, nothing more." Their voices stacked, brick by brick, building a wall meant to box him out. Still, he didn't move. The junior employee clenched her fists, face flushed. "Stop it," she muttered, louder this time. Her voice trembled, but it carried. A few heads turned, annoyance flickering in their eyes. How dare she interrupt their order? The director seized the moment, doubling down. She reached for the napkin still on the floor, pinched it between her fingers, and tossed it onto the engine. The white square sagged against the steel. "There," she sneered. "That's what happens when dirt touches property that isn't his." Gasps whispered around the room. Not outrage, amusement mixed with disbelief, like spectators egging on a fight. The man in gray finally lifted his hand from the engine. Not fast, not dramatic, just a slow, deliberate motion, as though even gravity bowed to his patience. His eyes met hers again, calm and unflinching. That calmness unsettled her. She pushed harder. "Say something," she demanded, her voice cracking at the edges. "Prove you even deserve to stand in this room." But he didn't. He let the silence answer for him. And in that silence, the balance of power trembled, still leaning her way, but less certain, less safe. The room felt it, even if they refused to name it. The intern swallowed hard, his phone halfway raised again. He whispered, barely audible, "It's turning." He was right. The mask finally slipped. Her smirk collapsed into something harsher, sharper. She grabbed the greasy napkin off the engine and flung it straight at his chest. The cloth slapped against his uniform, slid down, and crumpled at his shoes. Gasps scattered through the boardroom. A few laughed, too loud, trying to turn violence into humor. Others stiffened, realizing a line had been crossed but unwilling to name it. "Out!" she barked, her voice echoing off glass walls. "Get out before I call security. This floor is for leaders, Not laborers. The words didn't tremble. They hit like a gavel, final and merciless. She wanted the humiliation sealed, irreversible. The man in gray didn't move. He stood anchored, shoulders square, calm eyes steady on hers. No rise in his voice, no shift in his posture. Only stillness, the kind that felt heavier than shouting. The intern's phone caught every second, the red light glowing like an ember. He whispered under his breath, almost pleading, "Don't touch him." But she wasn't finished. She motioned toward the glass doors. "Security!" she shouted. "Now!" Her command sliced the room. A few executives straightened, relief flashing across their faces. Finally, the problem would be removed. Others exchanged uneasy glances, their laughter gone. The junior employee stepped forward a half step, heart pounding. "You can't do that," she said, voice shaking but clear. "He hasn't done anything wrong." The director spun, eyes blazing. "Sit down before you lose your job." The intern's chest tightened. The junior employee's fists clenched. And the man in gray? He bent, slow, deliberate, picked up the napkin from the floor and placed it on the table neat, precise, as if returning evidence. Then he straightened, gaze never leaving hers. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was pressure, building, waiting to break. And the room knew this was no longer just humiliation. This was a storm about to arrive. He set the napkin down with surgical precision, as though even trash deserved order. Then he reached into his pocket not for defense, not for surrender, but for a slim black phone. One tap. The screen lit his face in a soft glow. "Carla," he said, calm, steady, every syllable deliberate. "Iniziate protocol. Bring the board online." A hush rippled across the room. The director froze mid-gesture, hand still hovering toward the door. The executives blinked, glances ricocheting off one another like marbles in a jar. The intern's camera caught it all, the sudden stiffness, the unease sliding in beneath their arrogance. A voice answered, crisp through the speaker. "Confirmed, sir. Protocol active. Secure line established. Logging incident in real time." Ugh. The title "sir" landed heavier than any insult thrown minutes earlier. The director scoffed, but her voice cracked. "Who exactly do you think you're talking to? You're not important enough to—" Her words faltered as the phone chimed again. A corporate seal flashed across the screen, projected large by the glass wall's reflection. An emblem every executive in that room recognized, their own company's crest, tied to access only the highest tier. The intern's breath caught. The junior employee stepped forward another inch, eyes wide. A whisper slid through the back row. "How does he have that clearance?" He didn't answer their questions. He didn't need to. He simply lifted his eyes, gaze sweeping the room, steady and unhurried. "This incident," he said, voice even, "is now being documented by compliance and ethics. Every word spoken, every action taken, it's all logged. Choose carefully." The laughter died completely. One executive fumbled with his cufflinks. Another shifted in his chair, staring at the floor. The director forced a smile, brittle and thin. "You're bluffing," she spat, some mechanic with a hacked phone. But no one laughed with her. Not anymore. The man in gray stood calm, phone in hand, silence pressing heavy. For the first time, it wasn't his silence that looked weak. It was hers. The brittle smile on her face couldn't hold. "What? Protocol?" she demanded, but the words wavered. Her confidence, once razor-sharp, dulled in the silence pressing down on the room. He lowered the phone, letting the screen dim, then straightened his shoulders. For the first time, he spoke not to her, but to everyone. "You mocked me for standing here," he said evenly. "You laughed at my hands, at my clothes, at the dirt you thought defined me." The boardroom stilled. Chairs no longer creaked. Even the hum of the building's ventilation seemed to retreat. "But let me be clear." His voice didn't rise, yet every word landed heavy. "This engine, this building, this company, all of it belongs to me." The words hit like glass shattering. The intern's phone jerked as his hand trembled. He hadn't expected the reveal so soon. Gasps flared across the room. One executive mouthed, "No way." Another leaned forward, squinting, as if hoping disbelief would make it untrue. The director laughed once, short and broken. "Ridiculous. Do you expect us to—" Her protest died when his phone buzzed again, a new voice spilling into the room. "Board line confirmed. Compliance monitoring live. CEO present." The title echoed, "CEO present." Every head turned, every doubt cracked. He didn't need to shout. He didn't even smile. He just let the truth settle like stone. Your contracts, your bonuses, your positions all signed by my hand. You thought you mocked a mechanic, but you mocked the man who built the floor you stand on. The director's face drained of color. She reached for words, but none came. Behind her, the row of executives shifted, some pulling out their phones, some staring at him as though seeing him for the first time. The junior employee's lips parted, a whisper escaping before she could stop it. He owns it. The intern's recording caught everything, the stunned silence, the widening eyes, the collapse of arrogance. And in the center of it all, the man in gray finally looked at the woman who had thrown a napkin at his feet. You wanted obedience, he said softly. What you'll have is consequence. The room fractured in an instant. The director's face drained pale, her lips moving without sound. The napkin she had thrown might as well have been a knife she'd plunged into her own career. She gripped the table edge as if it could anchor her, but the floor beneath her had already shifted. Executives glanced at one another in panic. The bravado that once filled their laughter curdled into silence. Some shuffled papers just to keep their hands busy. Others reached for phones, their screens reflecting wide eyes and beads of sweat. One man whispered, He's serious, as though saying it aloud might somehow undo the truth. The intern's phone caught every second. His breath quickened, not from fear but exhilaration. He whispered into the mic, He's the CEO, the CEO. They didn't know. His voice trembled with awe. The junior employee pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes shining not with tears, but with a vindication too sharp to hide. She stepped forward, shoulders squared, and faced the director. You humiliated him, she said, her voice cutting clear across the room. And now everyone sees who you really are. Gasps broke again. A murmur rolled across the boardroom like an incoming wave. A few executives glanced toward the glass walls, aware now that the intern wasn't the only lens they could see phones raised outside. Staff in the hallway, pressing close to the transparent barrier, watching history unfold. The director tried to recover, voice shaking. You tricked us! No, he cut in, calm but final. You tricked yourselves. You believed your prejudice more than your own eyes. The words landed heavier than any shout. Executives who once chuckled now stared at their shoes, shame creeping in like a shadow. The authority they leaned on had evaporated. From the back, someone clapped. A single, sharp crack that cut through the tension. Another joined, then another. Soon, a ripple of applause filled the room, not for the director, not for the board, but for the man they had called a mechanic. Phones kept filming. Every angle captured. Every smirk turned to silence. The power had shifted, completely and irreversibly. And the director, once queen of the room, now stood exposed, trembling before the man she had mocked. The applause didn't fade, it swelled. The echo of clapping rattled the glass walls, rolling over the boardroom like thunder. But he lifted one hand, and the room obeyed. Silence returned, heavier than before. He turned his gaze to the director, calm, steady, inevitable. You, he said, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Effective immediately, you are terminated. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They cut sharper because of their quiet finality. Her knees buckled. You can't. I already have, he interrupted, a single nod toward his phone. Compliance has logged this incident. Your credentials are revoked as of this moment. As if on cue, her badge clipped proudly to her blazer buzzed red. A faint tone echoed from the security panel by the door. Locked out. Frozen. Finished. Gasps filled the room. Executives leaned back, disbelief painted on their faces. One man stammered, But she's been here 15 years? 15 years of rot doesn't excuse a single second of prejudice, he replied, eyes shifting toward him, then scanning the others. Anyone who cheered, anyone who stayed silent, take note. This company no longer rewards cruelty. His gaze landed on the man in the silver tie, the one who sneered earlier about polishing floors. You're next. Access revoked. HR will escort you out. The man jolted, panic rising in his throat. He reached for his phone, but the buzz from his badge confirmed the truth. Locked out, stripped of power. The room turned colder. No one laughed now. No one smirked. Every executive sat rigid, faces pale, some clutching their briefcases like lifelines. The junior employee stood taller, vindicated, her voice ringing. Finally, the intern's camera didn't miss a beat. He whispered, "This is history." "Oh." The director tried one last protest, her voice ragged. "You'll regret this. The board. I am the board," he cut in, calm as ever. "And I don't regret justice." Her mouth snapped shut. The fight drained from her eyes. The applause returned, this time louder, freer. It wasn't polite, it was electric, charged with relief and fury finally given form. And at the center of it all, he stood unmoved, the storm's calm eye, delivering judgment without raising his voice. The clapping rumbled like a wave, breaking against the walls of glass and steel. But he stood still, letting it pass, his presence commanding more than any applause. When the noise softened, he spoke not loud, but with a weight that made every head lift. "You called me a mechanic," he began, his voice steady as stone. "You mocked these hands, said they belonged only in grease and shadow." He raised them slowly, palms open, calloused, strong. "But these hands built the very foundation you sit on. Every floor, every profit, every contract it passed through me. You laughed at dirt, but dirt is what grows empires." No one moved. No one breathed. His gaze swept the room across the pale faces of executives, the trembling director clutching a useless badge, the intern still recording, the junior employee standing taller now, defiance alive in her eyes. Then he stepped closer to the engine on the table, the same machine they used as a prop for humiliation. His hand rested gently on its frame. "This engine," he said, "is power-harnessed, steel-beaten, scarred, and forced to serve. You thought I was the same, but I don't serve prejudice. I end it." He straightened, shoulders squared. "Remember this day, because justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits, silent, patient, and then it moves." He turned toward the director one last time, calm, merciless. "You mistook silence for submission. That was your last mistake." The words dropped like a gavel, final, irreversible. The applause rose again, but this time it wasn't polite, it was cathartic, a release. The junior employee clapped hardest, the intern's camera still glowing, broadcasting to anyone who would watch. The mechanic who wasn't. The CEO who revealed himself. As he walked toward the glass doors, his voice carried one last truth across the stunned silence. "I don't need to prove who I am. You proved who you are. And now, you live with the consequence." The doors opened. He stepped through. Behind him, the boardroom wasn't just silent. It was shattered.